it sounds like we're heartless people, but it's beneficial for our
Okay,
denomination.
so that's kind of, well, I put it this way. So if I were working for a company and they were providing my pension and I went out on the street corner and protested the company, should they still keep paying my pension? Like my parents would say all kinds of nasty, false things about them. Should they keep paying my pension? They don't have to do that.
Welcome back to the Nazarene Nerd Podcast. I'm David, the Nazarene Nerd, and today I have with me my dad, Waylon.
Hello, I'm Waylon. You heard a lot about me, but I don't know. I think you over-exaggerated. I have a lot to live up to, I guess, today, so.
I haven't said anything about you yet.
You did.
Oh, yeah, I did.
You did
On
on Andrea's podcast with her, yes.
That's right, yeah, I did.
That was, by the way, that was a good podcast. I really enjoyed that. You did a good job on that.
That one was more of a broad topics, more about connections, but we got, on a lot of stuff that I wasn't planning on hitting, but we did hit some stuff, so I wasn't really prepared to kind of dive into a lot of them.
Yeah.
She was, though. She was ready to go.
Well, I'm telling you, if you want it, like you talked about abortion being a later episode, maybe bring someone who's far lefter and on that subject, she's kind of in the middle, and me and you, and we could do a bigger podcast that way.
I mean, I'd have to have a better setup. I got two mics. That's all I got right now. That's a later day.
Yeah.
Well, if I bring up abortion again, it's going to be a more of a defense episode than would be a discussion.
Yeah.
If I'm going to do a discussion, I'm going to do a roundtable when I need to get a bigger setup. But
and if I say any naughty words, if you're going to bleep me out, I want the duck sound. Just by the way, so.
Mom would kill you if you said any naughty words.
I don't use naughty words, but we could pretend. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Duck.
I'll put that in there.
Okay.
The power of post. So what topic were we going to hit today?
Recent changes in the United Methodist Church. It's near and dear to my heart because I have a lot of good Christian brothers and sisters still in the United Methodist Church, preparing to make some serious decisions, make some big changes because of what their denomination has done. And I watch it closely because the Nazarene Church, our own denomination, came out of the Methodist Church, and we're very closely related to them, and we're starting to see some small signs of what has happened in their denomination. Much smaller scale, a lot fewer people, but similar things happening. And so I'm keeping my eyes wide open in our own denomination, and I think it's good to talk about what's going on there. Because, again, I've had a lot of conversations with friends of mine who are getting ready to... Actually, I have friends who've already left. They were part of the disaffiliation last year. Do you realize that...
That was the official one where they made the...
So the
World Methodist Church or something?
No, Global Methodist. Well, they didn't make it. It was started by people who left the Methodist Church. But one of the things that... what happened was at one of the last general conferences. Let's back up. Let's back up on this subject. So the subject is going to be changes to the United Methodist Church. What's going on there? So
let's back up even further, just to kind of a historical context of. You said that the Nazarene Church has come from the Methodist Church. The Methodist Church was founded
by John Wesley.
John Wesley back in 17 something. I can look that up.
I don't remember the date, but yes,
because I have the two dates that I have. 1730 was when John Wesley and Charles Wesley, two students at Oxford, had founded it. And then in 1968, 1784 then was the Episcopal Church, was organized in Baltimore, Maryland by Thomas Coke and Francis Asbury. And then in 1968, the Methodist Church was founded.
United Methodist
Church.
Yeah, so and I've had a lot of people tell me that there were many people in the Methodist Church that were very leery when it became the United Methodist Church, because they became this big umbrella, big tent, and it brought in a lot of different people from several other denominations that I don't think really aligned with the original mission of the church.
When did the Nazarene Church get founded then? When and why did we break off from that?
It was in the 1800s, if I remember correctly. I don't remember the dates. I hate to say that, but I can tell you that our personal local church was founded in 1942 or 43. I don't remember exactly. We were a church plant from the Broad Top Church of the Nazarene came and had a revival in this empty abandoned church that was sitting here in Rock Hill. Had been abandoned for a long time.
Which is an Episcopal church to begin with.
Exactly. And they cleaned it up. They got permission, cleaned it up, had a revival, and then they bought the place and planted the church. And we've been there ever since the 1940s. I have the very first in the church's lockbox at the Community State Bank is the board minutes from the very first meeting in 1940. And well, I think it was like the first year's worth of minutes. Isn't there's a book. It's a binder.
We should get a copy of like that for a front page.
You have a lightning bug on your he's on your headphones now.
Oh.
On this ear.
Oh, hey there.
Yeah.
I don't know where. Oh, he's still there.
He just wanted to say hey.
There he goes.
Anyhow, we could edit that out.
But that's fine. It'll be all right. It's content.
Yes, it is. So where are we at? Oh,
something about the minutes and.
Oh yeah. So we have the minutes from the very first, when they organized the church, the very first church board and all that. It's really interesting. I took a picture of like the first page. I think it's something we're going to get out and we need to like probably scan it, because if not, it's getting faded. It's written in pencil in this like leather bound book. So we need to preserve that. But anyhow, and we're going to get more content.
I wonder if it's the same one from the other day.
Maybe. So anyhow, but so the Nazarene Church was formed out of several groups that left the Methodist Church and left some other churches and combined as a holiness denomination, because the Methodist Church used to be a holiness denomination. And that's really not the topic of today, but that's just kind of the background. So background on the subject today, for many years, I believe the United Methodist Church, upper leadership, high leadership in the United Methodist Church has been flirting with a lot of unbiblical precepts, a lot of unbiblical things that are tied to society, right? Whatever's become popular in society, they've really been flirting with sin is what they've been doing. And we're talking about upper leadership. And at the same time, they've had a lot of people want to change the denomination that have kind of infiltrated it from within, joined the seminaries, got into the pastorate, and brought a lot of unbiblical doctrines into the church and have been kind of promoting them quietly. Also then maybe not so quietly, kind of just thumbing their nose at the doctrines of the church. We have a church manual. They have what's called the Book of Discipline, and it lays out their doctrines like we do in our church manual. And there's very, very good biblical doctrines in there. And basically they've been kind of thumbing their nose at it for some time, all the while trying to get enough support in the church to vote some of those doctrines out of their Book of Discipline.
But that's not the only church that's done it.
Oh, no.
You could see it in our church.
Presbyterian USA Church today, I believe, has done these things prior to this. There's over in Church of England, Anglican churches have done this. There are
the Nazarene Church are starting to. There's some people that done it.
There are people in the Nazarene Church that are trying to push it. They're a smaller minority than what we saw in the United Methodist Church. It's the way it always is, right? When you're the small minority, you're quiet and you do things secretly. And as you get enough support and like a groundswell, and then you take over and you become the majority and you push everybody else out. And that's what they did. But we'll get into that, what they did here a little farther down this conversation today. But it's been growing. It's been contentious over so every 4 years they have what they call their general conference. We call our General Assembly in the Nazarene Church, and they've been kicking this subject, kicking the can down the road. They've discussed it, been heated arguments, and just kick it down the road. Well, one of the last general conventions, it became so heated, they said, all right, we're gonna do something. And they put in a clause that said, if you don't like what's coming basically in the church, we're gonna put a clause in that your church can disaffiliate and leave, but under very strict guidelines. Because like the Church of the Nazarene, the United Methodist Church, your local church is in trust of even though we paid every penny for our properties, our buildings, and facilities, everything else, your church is in trust of the denomination. If you choose to leave, you're not taking your buildings and property with you. They keep it. And that's what's happened in the Methodist Church. They held those hostage. And basically, if you want to disaffiliate or under this clause the last 2 years, there was a formula that said you have to pay a percentage of the property values and all this kind of stuff. I know a few churches United Methodist churches over in McConnellsburg have gone together and done this. It's expensive.
But at least it's a percentage of the value and not like the entire thing, which is what they have to do now.
So we'll get to that in a minute, but that's a whole other, now it's worse. But so talking to some people locally, they looked at it, and even though it was a percentage, it was still more than they could come up with, basically is what's happened. That's why a few of the local Methodist churches here in the area, Mount Union and Orpizonia, didn't disaffiliate, because when they saw the formula and they were just like, there's no way they could come up with that kind of money. So they just kind of prayed and held out hope that when General Conference rolled around this year, that the church wouldn't do what it is threatened to do, but it went ahead and did it anyhow. And we'll get to that in a minute, exactly what they did. But just to let you know, I don't know how many churches there are in the United Methodist denomination altogether.
I would assume more than Nazarene.
Oh yeah, the United Methodist is one of the largest denominations.
The Methodist, the Baptist, and the Lutheran.
Yeah, all called mainstream, right?
Yeah.
They're the mainstream denominations. But 7,700 plus churches left in the denomination last year.
And I saw
under disaffiliation.
I saw, was it like 1 to 3 million people left the church in one day?
Okay, so let's back up. Disaffiliation, which is that process they put in place, 7,700 churches left. I'm not sure exactly how many. I think I read somewhere that it was like a quarter of their entire membership left. But here's the more interesting thing. A quarter of the membership left, but 50% of the dollars left the church.
That says a lot.
Says a lot. So people, they voted with their feet is what they did last year. So anyhow, move forward to this year when General Conference came about. I will say this. When you see how people, not only what people do, but how they do it, you see their heart. So anyhow, one of the things that was holding back the United Methodist Church from voting to change their book of discipline to match more modern society, and we'll get into what those were. There was a lot of their I forget what we call them. Their conference attendees, their delegates. Okay. That was the word. Delegates from other nations like Africa and other places were very conservative and coming over and voting to not allow them to do it. That's what had happened historically. When General Conference rolled around this year, they waited to set the date real late, and they made sure that delegates around the world couldn't get their visas in time to come vote. None of the national delegates came. It was almost all North America because they played dirty. They made sure that those, either they weren't going to be able to get their visas, or they scheduled it late enough that they wouldn't have time to get their visas to come to the conference in America. So,
because stuff like this doesn't happen in other countries. The issue,
certain countries,
the issues that are in
Europe is worse than us.
Yeah,
but other places are more conservative, especially Africa, South America. Mexico, the families are more conservative a lot of times than we are. There's a lot of very devout Catholics in Mexico, and they're more conservative. They wouldn't do this either. So if they've immigrated to America and now they happen to be part of the Methodist Church, they would not go along with this either. So again, a lot of the international delegates couldn't get to the General Conference, and it was because the denomination played dirty. So that's the background to where we got to General Conference. So what did they really do at General Conference? That, again, many of my friends who are sincere Bible believing Christians prayed it wouldn't happen. But the things they did. So it's not all about homosexuality. It's about sexuality. So one of the things they did was they did away with bans on adultery in the church. Not just homosexuality, adultery itself, and sex before.
Which is literally in the Ten Commandments.
Exactly.
Whatever, I mean,
Exactly.
People can have their arguments about homosexuality, whether that word is in the Bible or not, but the literal word adultery is in the Ten Commandments.
So what they did. Okay. Oh, let's back up. So one of the clergy are now no longer specifically required to be celibate if they're single in the Methodist Church. So if you're a single pastor and you sleep around, it's okay now. You're not going to be discharged out of your position as pastor any longer in a Methodist church. And you don't have to be monogamous, even in your relationships. Along with, they've done away with a pastor can be homosexual, which was not allowed before under the Book of Discipline. Instead, they've put this general clause of immorality, but there's no definition around what sexual immorality is. They've removed all the guardrails.
So really, there is no immorality.
No.
They put the word in there, but there is no
But
immorality.
if there's no definition, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
You can define it as to whatever you want it to be. The specific bans on, let's see here. There was a couple other things here. Those seeking ordination are no longer expected to demonstrate fidelity in marriage and in celibacy if they're single.
This all sounds like a Babylon Bee headline.
Yeah, exactly. It wrote itself. The Babylon Bee could have just reported this and people went, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
No, it's not what it was.
They reported on not to.
So in the Book of Discipline, there were bans on celebrating same-sex unions. That was done away with. Clergy were not allowed to perform same-sex unions or whatever. That's all done away with. Clergy now have the right to exercise and preserve their conscience on however they deem sexuality is to be.
At this point, anything really.
Yeah, basically, there was a ban in the Book of Discipline on funding gay caucus groups or homosexual advocacy, or I always talk a lot about activism. They weren't allowed. There was no church dollars allowed to go to like gay pride parades, right? People weren't supposed to participate, but they didn't really enforce it. But now your church dollars can go. So this church down the road, your tithe you're required to give to God, back to God, what He's blessed you with, now can go to. They can send as much money as they want to a gay pride parade or whatever,
Parenthood or anything like that,
or Planned Parenthood, right? There were other. I'm not going to go into all the decisions, but they relaxed language on abortion and other things. I mean, there's a long list of the things they did on abortion. They I'm not going to go into the language, but it's just, they've relaxed all this language. Basically, they've done away with all their Christian standards. They've really
It doesn't sound like a church at this point.
And it's a social club. It really, when you do away with God's standards, any of His standards, you become a social club. You're no longer a church, and that's what the United Methodist Church has done as a denomination. So, with that being said, that when those votes came down, I immediately reached out to a couple of my friends who are still in the denomination and just heartbroken, what are we going to do? Because basically at this point, so let's go into now, since the disaffiliation clause expired December 31st of 23, there's nothing in place to account for it as they had last year. So what they're being told by the denomination is this: if you want your church, your buildings, your facilities, you as a church can vote as a church to close the doors, close this church officially, and then buy it back at full value. Which you've already paid for it.
Yeah, and if they can't even afford a percentage, there's no way they can afford the entire church.
Exactly. So that's what it's evil. What the denomination has done is evil. And we were this morning on a hike. I noticed that you're going to have David Painter here on one of the podcasts. You guys already recorded that one. Him and I were talking about this very subject this morning, and I said, I really feel, as I've had my eyes wide open watching our own denomination, that there needs to be some grassroots support for somebody to push for some language in our own church that says, that needs to go to General Assembly, that, yes, we understand we're a trust and we could lose our buildings if we leave. But I think that we need to come to a compromise in our own denomination before we get there and say, look, If the denomination breaks trust by doing away with biblical principles that the denomination was founded upon, you should not be able to take our buildings. You have broken trust with us and with God's word and with God himself. How do you get to keep that? And again, if our denomination has been saying, all along, the last several years, our denomination, no, we're dealing with these things, because the whole entire Netherlands district of the Nazarene is apostate. Again, the United Methodist Church, what they've done is they've become apostate. They are now an apostate denomination. They're out of step with God's word. They're out of step with God. So they're apostate.
But how do you get to, when you bring that to something like the General Assembly, how does then, or you just say they have broken trust when they can just say, no,
I don't know.
haven't.
I need some smarter people than me
to
write the language. It has to be.
All what they would have to say is, we haven't broken trust. We're taking your church.
Well, no, you have to lay it out in specific language as to our denomination. These are the
if you take away these things, then you have broken trust.
Well, and you're going to have to be specific, especially with when we know what's going on in society and again, with just what's happening in the United Methodist Church. I think we need to. Our churches need to protect ourselves. And I think we need to get together as churches and say, look, we can't allow this to happen to us. I don't think we could ever stop if over time, people filtering into the church to undermine it, and you get more and more of them, they could probably do the exact same thing. I'm positive they could do the exact same to the Nazarene Church. It's going to take a lot longer, I think, but it probably can happen. So we need to protect ourselves from it. If and when it does happen. And Dave and I were talking about that this morning. And so that's something. And if leadership would balk at that, say, well, then do you really believe, then what you told us is that you're dealing with this issue, then you're not dealing with the issue. And that's what I think we need to challenge leadership with. Going along with that. And I shared this with you the other day. Eastern Nazarene College. I attended there a year.
A year.
I went there a year. I'm not going to go into how I got in trouble and on probation. I was on academic probation. I was fined for being in my room and when we weren't supposed to be during break, and
you got kicked out.
And whatever. But anyhow, I was there a year. I was not the model student. I spent a lot of time in the game room playing foosball. Pinball and going to concerts. I did. But regardless, ENC, Eastern Nazarene College in Quincy, Massachusetts, right outside of Boston, was one of the biggest Nazarene colleges. It was also one of the most liberal because of being in Boston. It was very,
even at the time that you were going.
Oh yeah, and it was very liberal. Just now, I don't know of all the things they've done, but as being out of step with the denomination, how they address the subjects of creation versus evolution, even at a Christian college. How can you really teach evolution as a fact if you're a Christian scientist? I mean, again, go to Answers in Genesis and look at those guys and what that is what our Christian colleges should be teaching. The biggest thing
science. When you do the scientific formula and you find your where you try
scientific method,
the method, and you try to find the end result. And what they say is, if we do our method and the end result doesn't line up with Scripture, we go back and do it again. Because the difference between a Christian scientist and a secular scientist takes, here's our result, that's what we're going with.
Yeah.
Where a Christian scientist says, well, this is biblical. If this isn't the result we get, we're going to go back until we get that result that matches with it. And 9 times out of 10,
well, that's what's happened with climate change.
10 times out of 10, they get it if we have the resources to figure it out.
Oh yeah, well, so they're all government funded, right? Anything that's evolution or the big one today is climate change science. That's all government funded,
which does change 4 times a year. It's called seasons.
Yeah, and it changes longer term. We come out of an ice age at one point. After the flood, it was probably much colder, and the polar ice caps had probably come down because of. I mean, I know Answers in Genesis has addressed this, and as it receded, right? And as it's warmed up, we've gone through cooling and long-term cooling and warming, right? And that's it's caused by the rotation and tilt of the axis of the Earth, but mostly it's influenced by solar flares and the activity of the sun. And we're going to go through those periods. We don't have any significant effect on the climate or any of that. We just don't. It's nonsense. And again, going back to research, it's proven that climate change research is they test to get the result they want, and then they cherry pick all their data. They ignore any data that, just like with creationism, anything that challenges or would not align with evolution or not align with climate change scientists, those are always weeded out. They're always filtered out, and they only pick those things, facts that they deem that give them, their answers they want, the predetermined answers.
So you won't hear in high school about when they landed on the moon, which is a fact. They did land on the moon, no matter what people want to say, because I saw that movie coming out, how they faked the moon landing, whatever.
Yeah.
The pads on the bottom of the ship that landed on the moon, the
lunar module,
they had made those to be built for the millions and millions layers of dust that should have been built on the moon. And when they landed,
snowshoes.
Yes, when they landed, the amount of dust that they sunk into was equivalent to about 7,000 years.
Exactly.
Which is about
that's exactly
the
what we say
for creation.
Exactly. That's creation.
But they won't tell you that in science books.
No, they don't want to talk about that. But that's a fact. That's a fact. But so again, we kind of got off subject, but again, Eastern Nazarene College, I believe now they've been in financial trouble. They've had dwindling college enrollments. But I believe they could have weathered all that if they would have stuck to God's standards and God's word. I believe anytime you label yourself a Christian or a Christian organization, and then the things you do don't line up with God's word, God's standards, you're putting yourself in a place of judgment. Okay, so what they've done is, how's this sound for a Christian college? Well, they sponsored one of the biggest Black Lives Matter marches in downtown Boston as a Christian college. They had a George Floyd scholarship at Eastern Nazarene College. There's been definitely
they have pride events.
They've different pride stuff going on, of course. And then now this one's interesting. This one you'd have thought would have actually helped them stay solvent. The government was giving them money to house illegal immigrants in the dorm rooms. All these people coming across the border, like in New York City, they're putting them in hotels and everything like that. Putting up our veterans are sleeping homeless on the streets, but they're putting these illegal migrants in fancy hotels in New York City. Well, they were doing it at Eastern Nazarene College. The government was giving them money to house them. But even though that money was coming in, it wasn't enough to save them, because I believe it's a judgment from God. Eventually, if you're going to call yourself a Christian,
which is a shame, because they were starting to get back on track of
they did hire a president who was a very godly individual, and I believe she was trying to get them back on track. She was doing some good things, but I believe they were too far gone. But when you reject God's standards, you bring judgment upon yourself. And what's one of the 10 commandments? Thou shalt not take the Lord thy God's name in vain, right? That doesn't mean cursing. That means I am calling myself a child of God, and then I live nothing like it. You're taking his name upon you in vain. You only have a label. It's only a surface or a very shallow Christianity. But then on top of that, you do things that are ungodly. Again, ENC, I believe.
I'd say that commandment's a bit deeper. I mean, I would say it also goes along with, using the Lord's name as a curse word.
Well, yeah, that's a surface reading.
Yeah, but there's plenty of, different ways to do that.
Oh, yeah, exactly. But
it's not just a cut and dry. It's just this one way.
No.
When the Bible says, keep your mouth clean of filthy language, it's very societal.
Language changes. Yeah. But
what a curse word was back in the 1400s is not the same today. It's not going to turn someone's head.
But using your language to tear somebody's down, to murder somebody through your words is that way. So yeah. So exactly. So again, I believe. So this is brand new news, right? Eastern Nazarene College board of directors or whatever their board is voted just this week to close the doors. They're going to graduate the people that's still in the program this year, but then they're transferring every other student to some other Nazarene. Working to transfer every other.
It's going to be a process, because they're going to have to, take the money that they have in take it to whatever other school they want to.
They say they're still going to have some kind of their mission is education, so maybe they're going to do some kind of online courses or something But I think it's a beautiful campus. There's a lot. I mean, they're right there on the shore. I mean, right up the street. There's beach. It's you're right next to Boston. And it's a beautiful area. But I believe just that the judgment of God comes upon people when they take His name and then don't act in the manner that God would have them to act. Don't live the way God would have them to live. Again, it's the same thing with creation out here. They did a lot of dumb things.
It thrived for many years. But the moment Pastor Harry went and started sexually abusing his, I think, granddaughters or nieces. I don't know I think it was granddaughters. Whatever it was young in his own church.
In his own church, his own family. They were his own family. He brought the judgment of God upon his church. He brought the judgment of God upon the Creation Festival. And what happened? Last year, they closed the doors forever on the Creation Festival. At one point, that was the largest Christian festival in the United States. 85, 90,000 people.
I think 2008 was about 98,000 people.
Whatever it was. And it dwindled down to like the last year before they closed.
1,400.
Whatever.
No, 14,000.
14,000, yeah. Which doesn't pay the bills for what they've tried to do for a 4-day festival. So again, there's no doubt you can bring the judgment of God upon you. So now let's move back to the topic. United Methodist Church is bringing the judgment of God down upon them. I told you, 25% of their people left the denomination last year, but 50% of the dollars walked away. So that's bringing the judgment and that was last year.
It shows who's the more giving of churches. The Bible believing people
were tithers and generous givers. So that was last year. Now, since they've had this vote, let's look at the other scenario. To be able to disaffiliate, you had to have a supermajority vote in your church to get out. So let's just say you had 59% of your people in your church who were Bible believing and wanted to leave. Not enough to get the vote to get out. So guess what? Those Bible believing people didn't stay. They just voted with their feet. Mm-hmm. Their church didn't disaffiliate. They just found another church to go to. Took their money, took everything, and went. So you have a lot of United Methodist churches, but even before this vote this year, just a couple weeks ago, and what they did, that there were churches that were 150 are now at 30 people. Churches that were at 500 are now at 70 people, right? So that's what the judgment of God is coming upon that church, that denomination, for what they have done. So fast forward. So that was even before this vote happened. That was people who wanted to disaffiliate and they couldn't get enough of people to agree in their church to have their church leave. So they just left with their feet, went across town to either a global Methodist church that already started or another denomination, whatever, right? So now, a couple weeks ago, they have these evil votes. I'm going to say demonic. I've told people demonic votes to basically walk away from God's word, walk away from God's standards, and most importantly, walk away from God Himself. And I went back, one of my devotions last week, maybe it was this week, it was last week, talked about Moses and Aaron and the golden calf. God had just delivered Israel from the hand of Pharaoh and the Egyptians, walked them through the Dead Sea on dry ground. That's a pet peeve of mine. Every time I see some depiction of the crossing of the Red Sea and there's water splashing and nonsense. It says dry ground. God opened the sea up, dried the ground. It wasn't even mud. They walked across, and then it swallowed Pharaoh's army right behind them. So they just did that. And then Moses goes up on the mountain to talk with God, and he's up there for a period of time. Is it days, weeks? Nobody knows. God's giving him the 10 Commandments, all this. And they're down there going, oh, we need a God we can see. Aaron, make us a God. Here's our gold jewelry. And he forms a golden calf. And here's your God, worship it. Think of
it. Had to have been a while because you have to melt it, smelt it, and then form it, make a cast, whatever.
Well, according to Aaron, they threw their gold earrings in and this golden calf popped out. If you read it, that's what he said. I mean, how ridiculous is that? I mean, talk about lying. Aaron lied. But anyhow, so they chose idolatry They chose paganism and pagan worship over the one true God who just delivered them. Again, the United Methodist Church has a rich, rich history from John and Charles Wesley and down the line, holiness, revivals across all continents of the world. The United Methodist Church is almost everywhere across the world. And now they've turned their back on God and have gone after the golden calf. And that's kind of where I see. And what happened next? Moses said, put your brother to the sword.
He broke the 10 Commandments.
Well, because he was mad.
Yeah.
He saw what was going on, was mad. But then he said, okay, who will stand with God? And all the clan of Levi did. He says, put everybody who was pagan who was worshiping the golden calf to the sword. And I forget how many thousand were killed in one day by the Levites, who then became the priests. So again, honoring God has its blessings. Honoring God, sometimes they're physical. But most importantly, it's always spiritual. But dishonoring God brings judgment. Rejecting God brings judgment. So the United Methodist denomination has brought judgment upon itself. So
very quickly too.
Very quickly. So let's we've kind of got all the background, and now let's get right to where we're at. A couple weeks ago, they have general conference. They make sure that nobody from overseas can make it to general conference. Your visas, you can't get them too late, and then by like overwhelming majorities, they completely gut the book of discipline on, sexuality and abortion and, all these things. And every Bible-believing person still left in the denomination, I'm sure, wept. I know people who did. I've talked to a lot of them. I talked to someone recently who she left the United Methodist Church about 2 to 3 years ago for this very reason, because she saw it coming and said, I cannot, my ties can't go to this denomination that I see it's coming. And she left, and she's good, close friends with me, and still some in the Methodist Church. She reached out to me right away. She says, "Did you see what happened?" I said, and she said, I knew it was going to happen, and she already left. But so now every Bible-believing Christian in the United Methodist denomination has a decision to make, every single one of them. And it's my job as a Christian to come alongside them and pray for them, encourage them. And everyone that I know, especially, again, I know a lot of people in the United Methodist Church in Mount Union, and the one here in Orbezonia. I probably know a few in the one in Shea Gap. And everyone I've talked to has given me the same message. We can't stay. We can't. Well, let's take one more thing. So anyhow, the week that they made the vote, they were so proud of this vote. So proud of it. This is what we wanted to do.
Ironic.
And yeah, ironic. Then you know what they turned around and did? They told every pastor to not bring it up in church the next day. If they're so proud of it, why did they not want it brought up in churches at all? They actually had all of their, like we have district superintendents, they have something similar. They went and put a message out to every one of their pastors and said, don't talk about the vote that just took place at General Convention.
I wonder if it said don't talk about it or it said don't talk badly about it.
I don't know. It could be either way. But then, of course, we found out it was, and one did, and their district superintendent then fired the pastor at that United Methodist Church for talking about it. And they gave, well, when she talked about it, she gave a wonderful sermon. And basically at the end of her sermon, tearfully, she said, if the United Methodist moniker stays over the door of this church, I can't stay because of what they just did, because that's not, I can't be a part of that. Heartfelt, and so she has to leave. So anyhow, she said that, and then she said, "I'm going to stay." Like they have a contract, and they do. I don't know if they do like a review every year or every couple of years, but her contract was up here at the end of June, and this was a couple of weeks ago, and the vote took place, and she said, "I'll remain through the rest of my contract, but after that, I can't stay." Well, the denomination said, "Oh, we accepted that as her resignation. You're out the door. You're today, right now.
No pension.
Yeah, basically cut her off." And so that's how evil the denomination. When when you do evil things, it's because you're evil, and it's never confined to the one thing you're doing right here. It filters into every part of your life. It does.
Sometimes it filters into other people's lives too that you directly affect.
Oh, there's no doubt. There's no doubt.
If you have an evil boss at your company, at some point, it's going to affect you one way or another.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt. Exactly. And let me back up and say that situation with the Methodist Church of Mount Union, the people there rallied around their pastor. They wanted to be in because what happened is the very day after she gave that sermon talking about what the denomination did and that she wasn't going to be able to stay, their district superintendent or whatever called her and said, "I want a meeting with you." And they knew what it was going to be, is to basically berate her, if nothing else, and fire her. Well, the church says, "No, we're not going to let you go into this meeting by yourself. We're going to go there with you." And then the district superintendent wouldn't meet with her, with the congregation there. Said, "I have to meet you by yourself." And she said, "Okay." Then the next day she did. Then she fired her. So very evil, very mean-spirited. It's all mean-spirited. It's so funny. The whole reasoning behind the stuff they vote, they always say it's because we want love and acceptance, and we want to be, we want to, what's the word? Well, it's always
Equality.
Well, there's the other word, not accept. It's like acceptance, but anyhow, it'll come to me. But we want to be, loving and accepting and all this stuff. But that's only if you agree with them. It's like politics. It's just like politics. So anyhow, these churches now have one. Basically, they've since that, and that's been about a month ago. This happened. The votes took place. They've tried to talk to their conference leaders or district superintendents. What can we do? What can we do and still and keep our buildings? When we're leaving. We can't stay. And they basically all been told the same thing: vote to close your doors and try to buy your buildings back at full value. Right. So it's an ugly situation, but I'll say this: it has pulled these Bible-believing Christians together in these churches. It even may do more than that. I know there's been some discussion that maybe a couple of the congregations themselves say we have one in Shea Gap, we have one in Orbizonia, we have one in Mount Union, we have one in Mapleton. Maybe they'll go together and form one church with the people that are still Bible-believing Christians. And maybe again, good can come out of this. Good can always come out of it if you remain faithful to God and His standards and His word. That's the lesson that I always say. And again, every one of my friends that's still there in the denomination, as we've talked, I told him, I said, if the Nazarene Church tomorrow does what the United Methodist Church did today, first thing is they'll never get another penny of my money. My tithe will go somewhere else. I will find a good church organization that I can give my tithe to, because that tithe isn't mine. It belongs to God. Whether if I can't trust my own church to take it and use it correctly, I'll give it somewhere else, and I'll find another, and then I'll be out the door. I'll leave. But again, we would have to give, as it stands right now, we would have to do the same things. We have to give up our buildings, properties, and what have you.
Do you think we'd have enough money to buy our church? Because I know that our congregation is very giving, and we've never struggled like that, or at least a percentage.
We probably could. I say, okay, so I talked to a good friend of mine at work he went to one of the Methodist churches over in McCallsburg area, and 3 smaller ones got together, and there was one that was a medium-sized and 2 smaller ones. They got together, and then the larger of the 3 churches helped the other 2 churches, and all 3 of them bought their properties back.
Oh, okay.
During the disaffiliation last year, they went through the process, and I said that they were fortunate. Their property, they were small churches, so it wasn't a large amount. But I would hate to see what the dollars are for these churches around here at full value. I don't know what they would even be.
The Methodist Church in Orby is gorgeous.
Yeah.
The one in Mount Union is huge.
Yeah. Well, Orbizonia, then they have the old gym too. So that's part of the church, right? So again, I'm encouraged by those who are dealing with this in a biblical manner. They're in prayer. They are working together. They are seeking good godly counsel from other people. Again, they've asked me questions. What would I do? They're asking other people. Again, praying about it, discussing it among themselves, and trying to do the right thing. What I do see, though, is in the church, those who've become complacent don't see the big deal. They're like, Well, it doesn't affect our church. Well, it does, because you're still paying your tithe, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're not, if the church doesn't pay, they'll just come and close your buildings anyhow. That's how they tried to. The Church of Mount Union, I don't know if it's 4 or 6 years ago, they were behind on their payments to the denomination, and they sent a pastor in there specifically to basically close the doors on the church. Basically, an axe man, sending them in there to close the doors. Because they were behind. They didn't. They were struggling. They've grown some since then. After but after that person left, they refused to close the doors. They did. They actually had a confrontation about it. The next pastor is the one that's there now, Pastor Gay. She's been very good. They've grown since she's been there. They've really they have grown, but they're still a small church. And they're going to have a very difficult time coming up with the money to be able to buy those buildings back. That's why I think if all three or whatever congregations go together, they could probably do something by another
one of the properties
or another church that's been that's empty today currently. So again, I'm saddened because I know so many people in the United Methodist Church and what they're struggling with and what they're dealing with. I've had several conversations with a couple of them, and they're just heartbroken. But they're resolved to do the right thing. I am so proud, not pride. There's good pride. Okay. Pride in self is always bad. Pride in what other people are doing good is always a good thing. You're proud of your children. I'm proud of you, what you're doing, right? And I'm proud of you with your promotion. I'm proud of you with doing this. This is a good start here, doing something good. I'm proud of you with you and your family. You've worked through issues, and you and your wife are raising your son in the church, and it's okay to be a proud parent and grandparent of those things. I'm proud of those Christians that are standing up for what's right. They are not just being complacent, because they've told me there's a lot of people in those churches. It's not everybody's that wants to do the right thing. Some people are just saying, "Oh, we don't want to give up our buildings. Can't we just go along to get along, and just leave the denomination do what it wants to do, and we just do our thing here."
There's certain topics that's a viable answer. There's a lot of stuff that's not cardinal doctrine. That is a viable answer, saying, okay, well, the denomination doesn't agree with these few things.
Okay, Church of the Nazarene used to be a very hard and fast rule that you couldn't go to the movie theaters. When I was a kid, I never got.
Church of No.
I know. Yeah, we were. I never got to go to the movies when I was young. I wasn't allowed. The church didn't allow it.
There's no dancing.
And my parents were not going to go against what the church's doctrine. But it's not a cardinal doctrine. It's not a salvation doctrine.
There's no dancing.
And the church has softened its stance. Now, some people might say, "Well, they're becoming more liberal." No, I think essential things we need to hold fast to. Things that don't matter, like going to the. If you could watch the same thing on your own TV, that's where it finally changed. People say, "Well, they can run." You're telling them they can't go to the movies. That's a rule. But they can watch the exact same thing on their TV. That doesn't make any sense anymore. So the better rule was we need to always be vigilant and be careful of what we watch at all times, no matter what our media, whether it's our television, your computers, or your phones, whatever, right? And that's the correct answer. So those things changing are okay. But when you change core moral doctrines of the church, human sexuality. Why is human sexuality? It's so funny. I hear people all the time. Why are churches worried about people's pants? I hear that all the time. Why are you worried about people doing bed?
What does Phil Vischer call it? Crotch Christianity?
Yeah, Phil Vischer. Yeah, if you're a fan of VeggieTales, Phil Vischer is Bob the Tomato and one of the founders of.
I think he was the creator of VeggieTales.
Yeah, but he was Bob the Tomato.
And he was also the Butler Asparagus and a lot of other voices.
But anyhow, today he's a very liberal guy that's I wouldn't give you 2 cents for his opinion on anything anymore. John Cooper calls him out all the time.
I mean, VeggieTales is very informational. I think it's really good. It's solid.
It's good for kids because it's funny.
It's solid doctrine too.
He was doing things doctrinally for children.
For the Old Testament.
Yeah.
It wasn't, his mother let him know that he couldn't do the New Testament because he was not allowed to portray Jesus as a vegetable.
Yeah. But somewhere along the line, he deconstructed. There's the scary thing. That's why the United Methodist Church is going through there's a lot of people in that denomination that have deconstructed, and they don't believe in the core principles of the faith. They don't believe in the core standards that God has put forth. Again, moral standards. We know, and I get into this discussion with people. Oh, well, you're wearing clothes with two different types of fat. I'm going, no,
You're eating shellfish.
You're eating shellfish, right? I love lobster, whatever. Because you don't you got context in God's word. Okay. So in the Old Testament, there were social rules or ceremonial law. There was civil law. Those two were for the Jews in their society. But then there was moral law. And if you read any time in God's word where it's moral law, you know what it is because it says it's always for all people. Murder was always wrong, whether you were a Jew or not, right? Stealing was always wrong in God's word, whether you were a Jew or not. But if you weren't a Jew, you didn't have to abide by the dietary laws. You know how we know this? In the New Testament, what's Peter get in trouble for? Peter's eating with Gentiles. He's eating, basically eating bacon or ham or whatever. And Paul calls him out not because he was eating it, but he says, when you're with the Gentiles, you eat like they do. But when you come home to the Jews, you go, oh, I'm not going to eat that stuff. Now he says, you're being a hypocrite. Paul didn't call him out because he was eating bacon. He was calling him out for being a hypocrite. And then Peter saw the light and said, oh, you're right. Yeah.
Someone's going to eat bacon whenever now.
Exactly. So again, we know that those laws were meant for the Jews as a society. But sexual morality, human sexuality is important. So again, the crotch Christianity. Why are you always worried about people's pants, what they do in bed? Well, it's not me. It's God. Your argument's with God. Why is that? Because God designed us male and female. God designed marriage to be a symbol of how he looks at the church. What is the church called? The bride of Christ. So when you mess with God's design for marriage, you're spitting in God's face because that's not God designed marriage. God designed sexuality in the confines of marriage. You don't find it anywhere else acceptable in God's word outside of marriage of one man and one woman. Now, talk about polygamy. That was Eastern society. And there was polygamy, but God wasn't pleased with it. And also, you always see what happened. Look at what happened with Jacob and all of his wives and different children. What happened? It never ends well. If you get outside of one man and one woman in a committed marriage relationship, you get outside. Whenever sex gets outside of that, it's always problems for anyone. There's sexual transmitted diseases. There's unwanted pregnancies. There's all now. When I say unwanted pregnancies, that doesn't go to the pro-life argument because I believe every child has intrinsic value because you are created in the image of God. But what I mean is now you have a child and you're not married. So what are you going to do? Are you going to man up and get married? What are you
just going to leave them
or leave them? That's what we see in our society today. Is people there's so many kids that are being raised without both parents. That's what's destroying society. One of them things, I mean, even if you weren't a Christian, even if you didn't believe in the Bible, just look at what it does to families. They're not really a family. You're destroying society because the nuclear family is actually what creates order in society. It always has. Why is that? Because that was God's perfect design. God's smarter than us. He knows. And that's why he designed it that way. He designed us male and female. You'll leave your father and mother and be joined to your wife. A man will be joined to his wife and they'll become one flesh. And then what is the first commandment God gave Adam and Eve?
Be fruitful and multiply.
There you go. To have children, to have a family, them two have a family. So, what the United Methodist Church has done is raise their fist at God and said, we know better. Whether it's on the homosexuality issue, whether it's on the transgender issue, they're shaking their fist at God that, oh, you put me in the wrong body, God. You messed up when you made me. No. It is human rebellion against God is what it is. All these issues.
I can't remember what his name is, but if you want a good topic on that, go look at Logan Paul's podcast when he talks to the two apologists. I forget what their names are, but they talk extensively about that subject. Now, I understand that it's more apologetics than it is like anything else, but it explains pretty well human nature and how we go towards human nature that's not correct.
Yes.
Because I love the saying is, God made me who I am, which isn't true. How do I put that? If you were born this way, but as a Christian, you need to be born again.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That is always the right stance. People, especially in the homosexual community, are saying, "Well, I was born this way." Well, we were all born into sin. We're all born with a sinful nature that has a natural rebellion against God's created order. But we must then submit to his will and be born again to be in right relationship with God. That's why these people that, again, the United Methodist Church and what they've done, how do they expect to be in right relationship with God by rejecting his created order, by rejecting his standards for biblical sexuality or gender? You know, the word gender wasn't used till just recently. That's a newer term. It was male and female sex. Your sex is male or female. Look at your DNA, XX or XY or whatever, right? That's who God created you to be. Now, people will say, well, some are they're born with, what is it?
The extra chromosome.
Yeah.
Or I don't know what the scientific term for it is.
but
hermaphrodites.
Yeah, they have ambiguity in their sexual organs or whatever. Well, guess what? Take a DNA test.
They can still find out.
It's still XX, or XY, XX or XY.
Even if you have the other DNA or chromosomes or whatever it is, your DNA test will still show the dominant genes.
And again, an exception or an abnormality should never cause us to question the standard. So I hear this. Here's the argument. I don't know if it's John Cooper and a couple others have used this same one. So how many arms do people have?
2.
Okay. So if you were born with one arm, do we say that, well, maybe one arm is, people will have one arm? No, that's an abnormality. People have 2 arms. You may have an abnormality. You may have have a mutation. It's a mutation. It's not and it's not beneficial either. A mutation is never beneficial, ever. And that's why evolution doesn't work, because in evolution, if it would ever have to work, you'd have to add information when there's a mutation and it to be improved. But every mutation man ever finds in any organism is always one that's to its detriment, and usually the organism dies because of it. Not that it becomes better or evolves. So,
and that's the biggest difference between people and other organisms. We adapt.
Yeah.
Adaptation is a thing. We adapt to it.
God designed that into us. Well, animals adapt too. A dog, again, we know that all dogs came from, there were 2 dogs or dog kinds on the ark. And, whether they were wolf or whatever it was, there was 2 of them, a male and a female. And when they came out of the ark and they began to multiply, and depending on where they went on the earth, if they went closer to the equator and it was hotter, they became shorter haired breeds. If they went closer to the poles and it was colder, they got longer hair breeds, or huskies or whatever, right? So and all those characteristics in the dogs were in their DNA from creation when God created them, and they just come out based on adaptation to wherever they were.
But even so, a dog, say it was born with 3 legs, a dog will never, ever be smart enough to make something to be its legs. No. While humans are smart enough to make prosthetics and adapt a lot better than animals even would.
Yeah, they have to. We have to. Wow.
Which is why lifespans of humans are a lot longer than most animals.
Oh, yeah.
Most animals.
Most animals.
There are some that just live.
Elephants or whales or
alligators and turtles, just live forever. But
yeah, never forever, but long time.
Yeah.
But, but that's where we're at, right? We live in a society that has rejected God's standards, but most importantly, has rejected God. And that's how we've ended up where we're at. And this rejection of God has infiltrated the church in many denominations, some more than others. We currently have, again, I think I mentioned, we have an entire district. Like, okay, so our church, our local church, is part of the Mid-Atlantic District here in the United States. It encompasses South Central Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Delaware. And it's an area like this, right? And it covers out to York and down, and around. There's in Pennsylvania, there's also 2 other districts. There's the Philadelphia district, there's the Pittsburgh district, right? So there's 3 districts in Pennsylvania. So the whole entire Netherlands district overseas has become apostate. They are ordaining homosexual ministers. They are performing homosexual unions, marriages, weddings, whatever they want to call them. They're not weddings. We know they're not. That it's fake because God ordained marriage between one man and one woman. But again, they're doing that, and our denomination is not disciplining them. That's a concern. That's a concern.
They've said they're looking into it and going to, but there hasn't been anything done.
Now, there are individuals in the U.S. that have spoken out and have said similar things to what the United Methodist Church has been doing, and I guarantee you they plotted with there are people in the Nazarene Church denomination, in some leadership positions even, that applauded what the United Methodist Church did. But they're fewer and farther between than what's in the United Methodist Church. But there's more and more as we've had very liberal professors in our Nazarene colleges and in our seminary, and they end up in the pulpit then. Mm-hmm. So there are more and more. Now I am encouraged. When we elected 2 new general superintendents this last General Assembly. One of them was very conservative. I've seen the research on. The other one is out. I'm out to lunch, or I'm still waiting to see what happens because I've heard some things both ways about the other one. He's liberal on some things and conservative on some others. So we'll wait and see how he does things as he's just getting started as a general superintendent. But there has been some encouraging things. There was a Nazarene district superintendent out in California, in one of the Nazarene districts out there, that they have pulled his credentials. He is no longer a credentialed pastor in any way in the Nazarene Church. Lost his pension. That's an encouraging thing, because if you're going to and there's another guy. His last name is
which sounds horrible. I mean, we're glad that someone lost all their money, whatever. We still want to pray for these people to come back.
Yes,
and it hurts to see them in that direction now that like they're out the money that they have worked their entire life for in the church. So it sounds like we're heartless people, but it's beneficial for our denomination.
So that it's I put it this way. So if I were working for a company and they were providing my pension, and I went out on the street corner and protested the company, should they still keep paying my pension? If I go out there and say all kinds of nasty, false things about them, should they keep paying my pension? They don't have to do that. And so it's similar to that. Now, again, that was one guy. There's another guy, I can't remember his last name is Thomas Ord. Yes, he wrote a book recently.
Something about
how the Nazarene Church needs to become gay affirming or LGBTQ plus affirming, right?
He had a book series or a devotional series, I think, beforehand that said that asked the question if Jesus actually was God as well.
Yeah. So he's had a lot of, I'll say, I don't know, apostate. He's not an apostate. That's more when you talk about apostate. That's usually a church, but he's definitely a false preacher. Yeah, he is deconstructed. He's deconstructed, and he has questioned. He's a credentialed elder or a pastor in the Church of the Nazarene. He was a professor teaching at some of our Nazarene theological seminary, I believe, or at least one of our Nazarene colleges, and he's been influential, and he's been teaching these wrong doctrines, completely unbiblical doctrines. Now, what Church of the Nazarene decided to do with him, especially right after this, he's been at a couple big Nazarene churches too, where he's pastored. And I've heard from people. So there's a group called Concerned Nazarene. It's a Facebook group that it's a bunch of conservative Bible believing Nazarenes discussing what's going on in the church, and they've been talking about some of the things he's done for some time. Well, some of the people who used to attend his church have raised their hands and said, this guy's been teaching unbiblical things for years, years and years, when he was their pastor. Well, anyhow, he came out with this book that the Nazarene Church should become completely LGBTQ plus affirming. And what they mean is, okay, so let's stop right there for a second. What do we mean by that? Do we in the Nazarene Church say that homosexuals shouldn't come to our church or be able to come into our church? Nope. We believe anybody is welcome to come into our church and find forgiveness. Find God's forgiveness there and turn their life around. Repent and turn their life around. We're a hospital. We're a spiritual hospital, and that's what it's for. Now, as Pastor Niccolo used to often say, to quote Pastor Niccolo, anyone is welcome in our church unless you're here to cause trouble. If you're here to cause trouble, there's the door. And so we're not rejecting or banning homosexuals from our churches. No, we want them to come in and hear the gospel and to repent and find God. But what affirming means is that people who are outright, openly homosexual can be a member of your church, can be on your church staff, can lead worship in your church, can
Be your pastor.
Be your pastor is what that's what he wants. That's why he's being fully affirming. That what fully affirming means is we want the Nazarene Church to say homosexuality is not a sin. That's a man-made thing. That's what they want. Because if it's not a sin, then it wouldn't matter. But God says it is. So anyhow, he put this book out recently, and it's endorsed by some other leaders in the Nazarene Church, that's the suspect thing that we keep looking at. Who's saying it's okay or endorsing it or whatever in the Nazarene, especially in leadership, or apparently they didn't stop. They stopped turning a blind eye to him. They kept moving him from church to church, and he was a pastor here, and then he was teaching at this Nazarene college or whatever, doing these things. Well, when this book came out, all of a sudden he left that last church. I think he was causing problems there, and they wanted him out anyhow. And what normally happens is, what does the district, like when our pastor retired, the Nazarene Church starts reaching out to pastors who don't have a church, they're called unassigned, and it tries to marry them up with a church, try to put them in a church.
Because in the Nazarene Church, we actually get a vote. We don't get
so they bring you candidates, and then the board of a local church votes. Well, basically, the Church of the Nazarene has not tried to assign him anywhere. They basically have left him unassigned. And if you are a pastor in the Nazarene Church and are unassigned for more than 2 years or something, I don't know what the number, maybe it's 3 or 4, whatever it is, you have to turn in your credentials. So they're waiting him out, is what the church, they don't want him to be a martyr, I guess, is what I understand. But they're just letting the clock run out on him, and he'll have to turn in his credentials because they're not going to assign him anywhere. They're not giving him any interviews. So again, that's a good step in the right direction. I kind of disagree with that. I think they should just discipline them outright. You don't create martyrs. When you're doing the right thing, you're not creating martyrs. You're not.
They might label themselves as that.
They can label themselves as that, but it doesn't mean you are one. So they're doing that. There's a district superintendent so Hawaii has its own district. The state of Hawaii is the Hawaii Nazarene district. Their district superintendent attended a gay marriage, and his son, who's a pastor in that district, helped officiate. They've not done anything yet. And there's video footage out there. It's been presented. So now we've been told that the discipline in all these type of matters is happening behind the scenes, I will say this, the Nazarene Church they just don't take your credentials and get rid of you. There's a process. There's a research time. There are internal boards that review situations and people before they make any action. So I think it's fair. I think that they should have all the facts. Now, again, there's video evidence out there. It's easy to see. I could point you to it. But again, I do see some positive signs that they are finally taking some action. I'm glad of that. Because again, if we don't, we're going to end up where the United Methodist Church is today. And I'm going to tell you this.
A lot of churches are going to end up like that. Not just the Nazarene Church.
Exactly. Baptist is another one. It's going to happen, right? But what I'm seeing, though, again, from the United Methodist Church is, I'm going to tell you right now, kind of like, remember when I told you back in 2017, I said, or maybe it was a little earlier than that, I said, creation is not going to last more than 5 years. I told you that. I could see it coming early. Right after they fired my mentor, Denny Keatsman, that year they went from a nonprofit to a for-profit. And this is on the tail end of the Pastor Harry thing hadn't come out yet, but this was at the very end of when all this sexual abuse was going on, and they were trying to use the festival to get to create a retirement for him from it. And I saw things going on that I couldn't explain. I didn't know why or what, but I saw it because I'd been a part of it since 1984. And I saw it coming. And I told you way before anyone else was saying, oh, the festival's going to go under. I said, it's not going to last. And it didn't. It lasted what? 3 or 4?
2023, I think, was the last year.
So it lasted 4 years after I said 5 years or something, it's going to be done. And it was. I'm going to tell you right now, if all the people that are Bible-believing Christians in the United Methodist Church just walk with their feet, just leave, and take their money with them, which will happen. That's what's going to happen. It already happened with the disaffiliation last year. It won't survive. I give it 4 or 5 years, and the United Methodist Church will be gone from the face of the earth. It'll be gone. And again, I believe that's the judgment of God. When you shake your fist at God, you can only do that for so long before judgment comes. Sodom and Gomorrah, shook its fist at God for so long and rained hail.
The entire earth shook its fist at
well,
God.
that was and then God sent the flood in Noah's day, right? And what did Jesus say was going to be the earth's condition when he returned? He says, as in the days of Noah. What were the days of Noah? Everyone did what was right in their own eyes and did evil all the time. If you look at society today, that's the direction we're headed. I actually had a thought in my head is we could have started today talking about that debate the other night, because that kind of you could talk about that, but it's been talked to death on social media, and I don't want to do that.
You can go look up and see how embarrassing the entire thing was.
Yeah, you can watch that if you want to, but I'm telling, that is a symptom of the bigger issue. Society is becoming more evil every day. We're not evolving into a utopia. We're not becoming a better society. We're devolving into a more evil society, and that's what Jesus said, as in the days of Noah. And that's exactly what it was like, and that's where we're headed. Now, I don't want to be all doom and gloom. I believe people are getting wonderfully saved every day individually, but in general, as a society, we're becoming more and more evil. Even though we are seeing people get saved. You're seeing evil men turn their lives over to God and get wonderfully saved and turn away from whatever sin it is. Let's talk about the transgender issue. Again, transgender issue is part of the United Methodist Church. They did some things there and votes, and now it's fully acceptance because it's all under the LGBTQ
umbrella,
XYZ, blah blah blah. I call it the alphabet mafia. Whatever you want to call it. If I called someone a name, I'm sorry. Anyhow, that's what it is, right? So transgenderism, right? If you go out and Google transgender regret, just look that up once, and you're going to find a couple sites.
Or even suicide rate after the surgery.
No. Look at transgender regret. Why I tell you that is there are a few organizations that have people who've God has touched and they've come to their senses. And they were living in transgender lives for years. One of the guys who's one of the main speakers who started one of the organizations, he did the full. He had every surgery to become a woman. He had it all, and he lived as a woman for like 14 years. And God got a hold of him, and now he's once again living as a man, completely, utterly regretful of how he's mutilated his body. But he's thankful for the second chance that God has given him through Christ's blood and forgiveness and salvation and freedom from that. Even though he physically has to live with this the rest of his life, he's going to get a glorified body one day. He'll get his body back in heaven, glorified body. We'll have that one day. But until then, every day he gets up and gets a shower and looks in the mirror, he has to regret what he did to himself. But why I say that is there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who are now have regretted that, who didn't commit suicide. There's people who commit suicide. And again, it's the numbers are starting to finally come in that having the surgeries is not taking away the depression.
The
suicide
go up
rate,
after
the suicide
surgery.
rates go up. Why is that? Because they've now permanently done something to themselves that was wrong to begin. Their thinking was wrong to begin with. That wasn't the problem. It was a heart matter. It was a spiritual matter, not a physical matter. They didn't fix anything. They just made it worse. But why I say that is you go out and look at those groups. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who are now out there proclaiming and trying to help people not go through with surgeries, not falling into this, because it's a proven fact that there's a huge percentage of people that, especially ones who went into transgenderism at a young age, that if they would have just been if they would have been discouraged from it, they actually grow out of it over time and not even bother with surgery and not bother if you'd let them grow out of it, right? There have been people who said they were girls who said they were tomboys growing up, and if they'd be living today, people would be pushing them to have surgeries and transition when they grew out of it, when they went through puberty. That's why it's evil. The whole society is pushing for puberty blockers for kids who are confused, because it's a fact that some people, once they go through puberty, finally grow out of it. They want to get a hold of them while they can when they're confused, and not allow them to go through puberty and grow out of it.
In a sad way, it's basically stopping brain function past a certain age.
It is. So, that's what society's doing. We have what is the guy? He was Pennsylvania's Secretary of Health, Dr. Levine.
Oh, Richard Levine.
Richard Levine,
Rachel Levine.
Right, calls himself Rachel now. He's a dude. I mean, he's not fooling anybody. I don't care who. I don't care who.
Fire.
I don't care. Yeah, basically, he's not fooling anybody. But he was questioned the other day about, do you believe in child mutilation, genital mutilation? Do you believe that kids should be chemically castrated or given puberty blockers to stop them from going through puberty? And he's all for it. He's all for it. And he's in a high leadership position. I forget what is he Secretary of Health?
General Secretary of Health, something like that. He has a ton of awards and rankings now.
Well, they gave him an honorary admiral or some nonsense, whatever it was. But anyhow, what I'm saying, what my point is, we have a lot of people with a lot of power in our governments, people who have power to make changes, to do things that are completely nuts. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say it that way. Are just evil. They're evil. They're not nuts. They're just evil. They're evil. They have evil agendas, and they have a lot of power. And again, before we get finished here, I'm not sure how we're going to wrap this up, because we could probably talk all day.
Yeah.
But
you could probably talk all day.
I could talk all day. I'm a talker. I could talk all day. But if you want to really listen to some guys who know this subject way better than I do, who are talking to the subject matter, John Cooper, who is the singer for Skillet, Cooper Stuff. Go check out that podcast. I watch it every time he posts one. So the day he posts one, I go watch it. The newer one I hadn't been, Elisa Childers, she's another one. She was a singer in the Christian band back in the 90s, Zoe Girl. But guess what? She is a super smart, very heartfelt conservative Christian who if you listen to her podcast, she's right on the money. And she's often on Cooper Stuff, and and John Cooper's a lot of times on her podcast. So, you get to see them both there from time to time together. Seth Gruber's the one I just started watching. I had never even heard of him before a couple months ago. And he started the White Rose Society, which was a very pro-life. Basically, his whole focus was pro-life. He was a pro-life organization. His podcast was Unaborted, I think, was what it used to be called. But he found out that the abortion issue is such a hard issue and a moral issue. It's not a political issue, that it actually it feeds into every other sin issue in our society. Every other sin issue is affected by abortion. Whether you're talking about social justice, you're talking about transgenderism, you're talking about homosexuality. Well, how's abortion and homosexuality attached? Well, You know how it's attached? The in vitro fertilization industry, where does it get all of its money? Gay couples trying to have kids. That's where they're getting all their money. That's why it's dangerous to support that industry, because most of their money is coming from the gay community. So they can have their kids, and then they groom them, and you know, I don't know what I want to say about that, except for the fact that it's an alarming rate that gay couples, most of them don't have any biological children. They've adopted usually or whatever. They might have surrogates through in vitro fertilization through one of them, whatever. But their percentage of kids who are in the LGBTQ is astronomical. It's physically impossible unless you've been groomed into that. Because the natural, what was it a couple of years ago, 2% of the population, 4%. But if you have two daddies or two mommies, your chance of being in the LGBTQ community is like 60 to 75%. It's
alarming.
It's alarming and unreasonable. It's impossible unless you're being forced into it, pushed into it. So that's why that's dangerous. But again, Seth Gruber, and he pulls no punch. Okay, I'm going to tell you right now, if you have sensitivities to how people talk, being very harsh, you might want to ease into Seth Gruber. He pulls no punches. John Cooper's pretty harsh, but he's still he does self-censor how he talks sometimes. Seth Gruber does not. He pulls no punches. So John Cooper stuff. Seth Gruber, watch this. Elisa Childers. There's
Wretched Radio.
There's
Ray Comfort, Living Water podcast.
Yes. Kirk Cameron.
Yeah.
Good guys. Tim Tebow. Good guys. If you want some uplifting, encouraging, or just good biblical knowledge, listen. Go.
Answers in Genesis has their own podcast.
Answers in Genesis. Babylon Bee.
As funny as they are, they're still pretty solid.
Yes. So again, I wanted to plug those while we're here, because we're gonna have good conversations. And in your podcast, as you gave me some topics to look at, it's really wide ranging. There's a lot of stuff. This is
very specific.
Today we're very specific. Today's very specific. Today's very religious. Not religious. Very
Christian.
Biblical.
Yeah.
Christian, biblical oriented. Okay. That's why I say, if you want to have the abortion discussion, I'll come back for that any day. I
might have to step out for that one. Have you, converse with somebody else, or even maybe get somebody from like Crossroads or something in here to, because I know my stance on it. I know what I've been told. I can look at research, but I'm not involved in that as much as some other people are.
Well, again, go watch Seth Gruber. Go back and watch it. Your mind is gonna be blown when you see every aspect, and he digs into it. The history of Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood started by Margaret Sanger, who was a complete racist. The only reason she started Planned Parenthood was to quell the black population. She was very racist, and that's Planned Parent. They give out the Margaret Sanger Award to Hillary Clinton and all these people. Why? Because they just love killing babies, especially black babies, and that's what they want. So when you watch Seth Gruber, you find out. I mean, that's probably common knowledge. A lot of people know who Margaret Sanger is,
which is why they.
But you go watch him.
Disaffiliated from her. At this point.
They have. But they've tried to. They've tried to wipe her from the. But you go watch Seth Gruber, and it goes deeper. There are direct connections between Planned Parenthood and Nazi Germany.
Makes sense. I'd believe it.
Yeah, eugenics is all about. Margaret Sanger's one of her henchmen was actually writing. His writings were used by Nazi Germany, by the Nazis. So it's all connected. So go watch Seth Gruber. But again, be prepared to have your sensitivities. Just he doesn't
trigger warning.
Yeah, trigger warning. But anyhow, so again, United Methodist Church, I believe, has been infiltrated by evil individuals bound and determined to take over. Maybe they're bound and determined to take over the denomination, but I say they're bound and determined to destroy the denomination, because it won't last another 5 years. Not at the rate that Christians are actually leaving. All they're going to be left with are the fruitcakes
that apparently don't tithe near as
much.
they're
not. No, they don't give to the church. If they do give, they give to pride marches and all that. So, again, I predict the United Methodist Church won't even be around 5 years from now, with how many people are just mass exiting. You mentioned earlier. So there was in one day, 1 million members of the United Methodist Church left. Now they were from Africa or somewhere. They were a conference that they were originally not United Methodist, and they had joined with the United Methodist, so they were not under the trust laws of the rest of them. So they get to keep all their buildings and stuff. They had just affiliated, but 1 million of them left in one day after this vote a couple weeks ago. One day, 1 million walked away. So again, I don't think the United Methodist Church is going to even survive. I think it's another couple of years and it'll be gone. And that's why I'm keeping my eyes wide open on the Nazarene Church and what's going on, because I do not want to allow this to happen to my own beloved denomination. I think there's a lot of very liberal Nazarene churches out there, sadly, but I believe there's still a lot of good Bible-believing Christians in a Nazarene church. I think it's the majority. I really think it is. I think it's regional. Are you in a city somewhere versus out in the country like we are in a country church? That kind of thing. And again, we're international as well, so we have churches from Germany or from Africa that are super conservative, more than maybe me, right? So they help keep the denomination
in check.
In check, yeah, they do, and that's what kept the United Methodist Church in check for a long time until they just again played dirty. They played dirty. They didn't want any of them there to have a vote. Again, it's obvious what they did, because 4 years ago, the vote was to stay to not make these changes by a very slim margin. But when they had the conference a couple weeks ago, it was 90-some% voted to make the changes. So they've weeded out the people that that they don't want in the denomination anyhow, which is sad. But I guess if I were a Methodist, that was my membership, I would walk away. I would already walked away too, and take my ball and go home, because it above all things, we are accountable to God. I am not accountable to the Nazarene Church above God. We are all above everything, above your employer, above our nation. I'm very patriotic, but God comes first. I'm a Nazarene, but guess what? God comes first. And when you put God first, all the rest of your priorities always come into line. They come into line. And that's where, that's people say, well, how do I know, how do I get in the center of God's will? Or how do I live in God's will? Or how do I know God's will for my life? Put God first. That's all you got to do. You put God first, and then all your priorities will come in line with that. And that's how you live in the center of God's will. Pastor Niccolo, I miss him probably more and more every day. There's days that I think about, I quote him a lot. He was my mentor for 29 plus years, and I was under his leadership as a Sunday school teacher, as the youth leader in the church, as a choir director, as, board member, every position I held in the church, I was under his mentorship for 29 and a half years. And he said so many things that were profound. And he often said, he says, the safest place to be in your life, no matter what you're dealing with, whether it's at your job or in your family or in your country, the safest place to be is in the center of God's will. No matter what you're dealing with, whether it's health issues, financial issues, whatever, if you're in the center of God's will, that's the safest place to be, because heaven's our home. Eternity's what we're looking forward to, and all this will pass away. And so if you're in the center of God's will, you're going to make it. And he's going to help you make it through. That's the thing. He don't just leave us here to flounder and hopefully make it. He'll help us make it. And that's why, again, I'm proud of those Christians in the United Methodist Church that are making tough decisions today. And I'm going to say over the next couple of weeks, you're probably going to find out about a couple of them here locally that they have a lot of consequences for these people, giving up their buildings, properties that they and their parents and their grandparents paid off. That's the sad thing. I look at our church. Your great grandmother, Eva Glunt, was one of the first members, an early member of this church, and she was a longtime member till she died. And her and so many others paid for that building, paid for that church, fixed it up, and kept it going all these years. And then to think that if the church, the denomination leaves us, we're left without, that they get to take what we paid for, or your parents paid for, your grandparents paid for, all that stuff. And that's what's happened in the United Methodist Church. It's not an easy thing. I know one guy that I think he's a great guy. I think he has great intentions, but he's in one of these local United Methodist Church, and he's like, I can't see us giving up our buildings. We can't, can't we just, can we just stay and we do us and let the denomination do what they're going to do.
It'll only work for so long.
You can only do that for so long, because what are you going to do when here's the thing, Pastor Gay down at the United Methodist Church in Mount Union, this is her last Sunday, I think, and she's done. She's going to go to the Global Methodist Church. What are you going to do when they send a lesbian as your next pastor down there? What are you going to do? You just going to still just go along to get along? What are you going to do? Because that's what they're going to do. They're going to force it on you. They're going to force it on you. And I'm stand up for what God says is right. It's not about God being on our side. The question is, are you going to be on God's side? When Joshua said, as for me and my family, I'll serve the Lord. Choose you this day whom you will serve. As for me and my family, we'll serve the Lord. And that's what we're called to do. God is there for anybody who's willing, whosoever will. That's why it just drives me crazy when I talk to Reform guys and they on this predestination and all that stuff. It's nonsense. It's
a whole other topic.
Yeah, we can get into that. That's a whole, but again, I only mention it because, so wrapping it up, what do you might, it's your show. What do you want to, tell me what you want to wrap up, and then I'll make a closing comment. I don't know.
Well, we both agree that the Methodist Church has gone apostate before the recording shut off because of disk space on my computer.
Yeah, so there's going to be I don't know if you
weird stop.
We don't know what you missed. If you missed 5 minutes or 10 minutes,
a minute or two. I saw it pop up, and that's why I said something. So
okay.
I noticed that the little blue highlight on the recording went away. So
yeah, so
we'll wrap up here.
There's going to be a weird little gap
from
there.
Wives that want us back.
Well, if you're sitting down and talking to me, I'm going to talk, or we'll talk. We'll talk. But yeah, we do agree. The United Methodist Church has gone apostate. It has rejected God's standards, but most importantly, has rejected God's word, or rejected God himself. That's what they've done. And in doing so, I do believe they've awakened a lot of Christians in the denomination. Say, we can't accept this, because they're walking away. They're walking away, and they're taking their tithes with them. They may not be able to take their buildings now or properties. That's the sad thing. Things that their parents, grandparents, great-grandparents probably paid for, but they're just buildings. That's what we've taught. They're just buildings. They're just brick and mortar. They might fall down tomorrow. We might get a tornado today, right? We thought it was a tornado. It could be gone tomorrow. Yeah, not matter. What matters is your soul. What matters is, will you serve the Lord or not? Will you follow him? Because what did Jesus say? I do not require sacrifice. It's obedience. He requires obedience. And when that's how you show you love him. Because what did he say? If you love me, you obey all that I've commanded. And that includes one man and one woman for marriage. And that's it. There's no exceptions. Jesus left no exceptions. There was no exceptions. God ordained marriage as one man and one woman. Sex is not for, entertainment. It's not, it's meant for the marriage bed, and it's meant for, oneness. That's why I said become one flesh, and to procreate, of course. Yeah. But when you stray, when you walk away, God's judgment is soon to follow. Especially if you still claim to be a Christian. That's where it's scary. People who are atheists, God will let them go. You're not claiming my name. You're not you're not giving my church a bad name. But if you claim Christ and walking in the exact opposite direction, you're walking to hell, but still claiming Christ, that brings judgment upon you. That's where you find judgment. But yeah, I agree. So.
Well, thanks for coming on. I'll have to stop you, or else she'll just keep going on.
Oh, I know. And your wife's going to come in here and drag us out of here.
Yeah, because she says she's hungry, and we know how that gets. So.
Yeah, hangry. Yep. I'm starting to get hangry myself. So yeah.
Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. I'll probably have you back on for something else. We'll pick something later.
Lighter.
talk about.
Yeah, we better pick something lighter. 'Cause if it's lighter, maybe I won't talk as much. We'll
Yeah.
see. Well, thanks for having me.
Yep.